time for the last 5Ds era archetype that will appear in the show until Konami decides to adapt more of them from the anime into the real game. What's left of them, of course, because I don't think there are many 5Ds era archetypes even left to be adapted into the real game. But anyway, we are taking a look at the Morphtronic archetype, which is used by Rua in 5Ds, which became the so-called sixth signer of the group. And yeah, we'll get to that fiasco later because it's a story and a half. And as for this archetype, it's an archetype based on monsters with dual effects based on what battle positions they're in. As in, if they are in attack position, the effect they have one effect, and if they're in defense position, they have another effect. Usually very similar and somewhat synergetic effects between each other. So anyway, let's start taking a look at their monster lineup. First of which we have the level 1 Earth monster, Morphtronic CELFONE. This one has 100 attack and defense, and while in attack position, once per turn you can roll a 6-sided die, reveal cards from the top of your deck equal to the roll, and special summon a level 4 or lower Morphtronic monster from among them, ignoring its summoning conditions, and shuffle the rest into the deck. And while in defense position, once per turn you can roll a 6-sided die, look at the top card and for the first top cards of the deck equal to the roll, and return them to the deck in the same order. The first effect basically makes this thing one of the best Morphtronic monsters ever made, as it also ignores summoning conditions, which is kind of weird since none of the main deck Morphtronic monsters have any alternate special summoning conditions, as far as I'm concerned anyway. I haven't even had the time to examine this archetype in a long time until this very video. And yeah, this effect was considered to be way ahead of its time due to the fact that we will not be getting any Morphtronic monsters with the with an alternate summoning condition. So yeah, oh wait, I just remembered, there is actually one Morphtronic monster which actually cannot be normal summoned or set, but it's one of their more recent pieces of support, so I guess the card was made as a way of future-proofing. But anyway, back to this. Like I said, they wouldn't get a Morphtronic with a special summoning condition until 2014, I think, and that is why this is basically one of the only two monsters in the archetype that has an inherent special summoning condition to summon other monsters and not itself. But yeah, it's a very good monster, while the defense position is very underwhelming, as it's literally a worse version of Ancient Telescope. It does not even allow you to rearrange the cards in any order you like, which makes it like you only decide to summon it in attack position, and that's as far as it goes. And not to mention that this effect is not a hard once per turn, meaning that due to its stats you can basically target it with machine duplication and basically make two other CELFONEs, which will all then give you potential to summon two more monsters for an instant monster. For an instant 5 monsters on the field without even using your normal summon if you summon him with 1/1 due to him being a level 1 monster. So yeah, CELFONE is a different 3-off staple in the archetype. And the other monster they got, which is one of their recent support cards from 2014, and the monster that does not have a standard summoning condition, is Morphtronic SMARTFON. This is a level 1 tuner with the exact same stats as CELFONE, but it has this effect. Cannot be normal summoned or set, and must first be special summoned from your hand by banishing a Morphtronic monster from your graveyard. And now for the actual effects. While in attack position, once per turn you can roll a 6-sided die, excavate that many cards from the top of your deck, and add one excavated Morphtronic card from your deck to your hand, and also shuffle the rest into the deck. And while in defense position, it has the exact same effect as CELFONE, only this one allows you to actually arrange the cards in any order you like. The second effect is essentially what CELFONE's effect actually should have been, and they should have basically given this thing some other effect if that was the case. Well, the first effect is actually a very nice way to search your cards. It's a level 1 tuner. CELFONE can summon it by ignoring the summoning condition. Has a special summoning condition itself. It can be used as material with Morphtronic CELFONE in order to go into a Formula Synchron. It can be used with any Synchro monster to go into Crystal Wing. It's simple and easy, and you should always consider running it. And also it's summonable, it's searchable by Werarf though, meaning there's even more applicability here to talk about. So yeah, this is an amazing card, and certainly a card done right. A level 1 tuner which is not that amazing is Morphtronic LANTRON. While in attack position, any effect damage you would take from an opponent's card is inflicted to the opponent instead. And while in defense position, when this card is destroyed by battle and sent to the graveyard, you take no battle damage this turn. The second effect is literally a worse version of Winged Kuribo. And the first effect basically is a counter to Trickstars, as many cards during the 5Ds era which was made to counter or negate effect damage. Yeah, 5Ds era was actually very packed with those cards. And yeah, it's pretty much not good, but it has the benefit of being a level 1 light tuner, which basically makes it searchable by Sage with Eyes of Blue of all things. So I guess you can consider it if you want to make some light or some monsters which require light tuners, but otherwise I wouldn't bother. Next up we have Morphtronic VACUUMEN. While in attack position, once per turn you can send an equipped card equipped to this card to the graveyard to inflict 500 damage to your opponent. And while in defense position, once per turn you can equip one face-up attack position monster your opponent controls to this card as an equipped card. And you can only equip one monster at a time to this card by this effect. And yeah, this is one of those monsters which actually has effects which are reliant on working in tandem in order for the card to be actually useful. And considering the fact that this came out before number 101, this kind of removal wasn't bad, but it was a bit too slow to be considered to be good on the competitive side. So if you have the speed to pull it off, it doesn't tend to hurt. There are some cards in the archetype which focus on changing battle positions, but in any other situation, this is not a good card to waste your deck space on. And a level 1 which you definitely don't want to waste your deck space on is Morphtronic MAGNEN, which is an Earth Thunder type monster, which is already weird enough as it is. Has 100 attack and defense, and while in attack position, once per turn if you control exactly 2 other face-up attack position monsters and no additional monsters, this card gains the combined attack on the other 2 monsters you control until the end phase, and the other 2 monsters cannot attack the turn you activate this effect, and while in defense position, monsters you control cannot attack. What exactly was the point of this card? I get what the point was. It was supposed to mimic the playstyle that Deskbots and Crusadias would later establish and evolve into what it is now. But it does in the most specific goddamn way possible. This one is a soft once per turn, requires exactly 2 other face-up attack position monsters, which is already like 4 other conditions. It requires you to control no additional monsters, which is yet another condition. It only gains the attack until the end phase, and it blocks the monsters from attacking, the other monsters from attacking, which is really baffling. And the second effect is much less wordy, but still much more insignificant and bad. I guess if you give it to your opponent with a permanent defense position lock, I guess you can lock your opponent out of attacking, but still the opponent can still link it away if he actually can do that, if you haven't restricted him in that kind of way. But yeah, that's pretty much the only use of this thing, which is very specific and not worth building a deck around. And their next monster is Gadget Driver. You can send this card from your hand to the graveyard and select any number of face-up Morphtronic monsters you control and change the battle position of the selected monsters, and this effect can be activated during either player's turn. Potentially useful, but it's still very specific in its utility, and not to mention not all Morphtronic monsters actually have decent defense position effects, so this kind of card is the thing you kind of side deck at 1 copy max. So yeah. Their next monster is Gadget Arms, which is our first level 2, and it has a flip effect to select a Morphtronic spell or trap from your graveyard and add it to your hand. The Archetype doesn't really tend to recycle stuff from the graveyard unless they are equips, and when it comes to that utility, they have a much better card in the Archetype, and some of the generic cards help out more than this thing, so you shouldn't bother because this is also a flip effect of all things, so yeah. Next up we have Morphtronic CAMERAN. While in attack position, this card cannot be when this card is destroyed by battle, you can special summon a level 4 or lower Morphtronic monsters from your hand or your graveyard except Morphtronic CAMERAN, and while this card is in defense position, Morphtronic monsters on the field cannot be targeted by card effects. The second effect can be potentially useful due to the fact that it actually is a pretty strong buff, although the problem lies in the fact that it also prevents targeting from all card effects, including your own, meaning you cannot use the Morphtronic equip cards, which are kind of good in this deck. And the first effect is battle floating effect, which hasn't been relevant since 2007, so you might as well just avoid this one. Next up we have Morphtronic CLOCKEN. Well, while in attack position, this card gains 500 attack for each morph counter on it. While in defense position, once per turn you can place 1 morph counter on this card, and you contribute this card to inflict 1000 damage to your opponent for each morph counter on it. Okay, so this one is quite the jumble of effects. So first of all, morph counters, yeah, when you know it's not a good sign when a monster has a counter related effect in an archetype that has nothing to do with counters at all. And spoiler warning, morph counters do actually appear on one other card on the archetype, which is not even good, and we'll get to that. And then it gains a very minuscule 500 attack for each morph counter on it, meaning it has to be in defense position for at least 3 or 4 turns to be a threat in any way for a level 2. And not to mention the second effect is essentially Wave Motion Cannon, which is removable by monster removal now, so yeah. Unless you're making some very specific stall build involving this thing's defense position effect, I wouldn't bother with this. Next up we have Morphtronic BOARDEN, which is our first level 3 monster, and while in attack position, Morphtronic monsters you control cannot attack your opponent directly, and while in defense position, other Morphtronic monsters you control cannot be destroyed by battle. This is an essential 3 out of 3 in the so-called OTK Morphtronic build, because if you summon this and then use Machine Dupe on it to basically summon 2 more Boardens in defense position, you would make a permanent battle destruction lock with this thing's effect. And not to mention that the third one, which is in attack position, is going to enable all the Morphtronic monsters to attack directly, and some of the other Morphtronic monsters are actually very versatile attackers, which we'll get to soon, which makes BOARDEN a definite 3-off staple in any build. Next up we have Morphtronic MAGNEN. This is also an Earth Thunder type monster, just like MAGNEN Bar. And while in attack position, if your opponent controls a face-up monster, this card can only select their highest attack monster as the attack target. And while in defense position, your opponent cannot select another monster as an attack target. The only relevant thing about this thing's effect is the defense position effect, which is a bit annoying to set up due to the fact that this is a Thunder type monster and has 300 more attack than usually desirable in order to be like a Machine Dupe target. But hey, at least you can somewhat set it up by utilizing some of the archetype support. But yeah, it's a bit too painful to set up. But if you can actually manage to pull it off with 2 Magnens on the field, then yeah, this is by all means not a bad card. But BOARDEN is a thing, so yeah, Magnen immediately loses all of its utility. Next up we have Morphtronic Remoten. This is a machine level 3 tuner monster. And while in attack position, once per turn you can remove from play 1 Morphtronic monster from your graveyard and add 1 Morphtronic monster with the same level as that monster from your deck to your hand. And while in defense position, you can send a Morphtronic monster from your hand to the graveyard to add a Morphtronic monster with the same level as that monster from the graveyard to your hand. Another very good example of these synergetic kind of effects, and both of these effects actually do kick ass, especially since this is also a level 3 tuner, which is a target for a machine dupe and can make to a rank 3 in the pinch, and due to the fact that it's also banishes the monster with its first effect, you can use it along with another copy of itself as Xyz material for Levier, and Levier can then use its Xyz material to resummon the banished monster and to continue your plays from there. So yeah, Remoten is a definitely good card to consider, and yeah, it's a very good card. Now another good level 3 is Morphtronic SCOPEN, which is a light level L3 tuner with this effect. While in attack position, once per turn you can special summon a level 4 Morphtronic monster from your hand and destroy it during the end phase. But while it's in defense position, this card becomes level 4. Not only is this a very good tuner which special summons another level 4 Morphtronic monster, which is good for their level 7 synchro, which we'll get to later. And the second effect is okay-ish. It does not go off too often, but when it actually does go off, it's actually a pretty neat way to actually get access to their higher level synchros. And due to the Morphtronic archetypes running a lot of equipped cards, and their boss monster can actually do wonders with equipped cards, some of the Violence synchros are also pretty nice to have around, considering the fact that this is also a light tuner monster. So yeah, great card. Next up we have another in the weird category yet again, that being Morphtronic DATATRON, which is a Pyro Fire monster with the effect that while in attack position, once per turn you contribute a monster to inflict 600 damage to your opponent, and while in defense position, once per turn you can inflict 300 damage to your opponent. These effects seem very out of place, don't you think? Well, that'll be if you are a TCG player with no knowledge of the OCG and behind the scenes for this card. And to enlighten you all, like you can see on the screen, this thing is supposed to be a 2 GB USB drive. However, in the OCG, that being the original card game, that is not the case, as the Japanese version is actually a lighter, which is also the reason why it's a Pyro Fire with the burn effect, and the reason why this thing appeared in my top 10 weirdest censorships video in the past. So yeah, this is why they decided to censor a goddamn lighter, is something that is truly beyond me. But hey, if they wanted to go all the way, they could have at least changed the type and attribute and the effect, but come on, they wouldn't go that far, would they? So yeah, this is a very weird card in the aesthetic standpoint, but effect-wise it's not pretty good, because the first effect is a bit too costly and requires field presence, and the defense position is somewhat better, but the fact that it's a hard once per turn, I mean a soft once per turn, is a bit of a downside, that you cannot even FTK with it. So yeah, simply a worse cannon soldier. Next up we have Morphtronic Radion, which is our first level 4. While in attack position, Morphtronic monsters you control gain 800 attack, and while in defense position, Morphtronic monsters you control gain 1000 defense. Not only is this level 4 which hits the field with 1800 attack on summon, but if you manage to get two more of them onto the field, you basically boost all of your Morphtronic monsters by 2400 attack, which is simply massive. And not to mention the defense boost becomes 3000 if you control all 3 of them in defense position. And yeah, if you want to protect yourself in any way, yeah, this is the monster to go. But anyway, this is basically the key star player in the OTK Morphtronics. So yeah, very nice monster to consider having, and you should always consider having 3 of them around. And one of the monsters that highly benefits from this monster is Morphtronic Boomboxen. This is another level 4 with the effect that while in attack position, this card can attack twice during each battle phase, and in defense position, once per turn, when a face-up Morphtronic monster you control is selected as an attack target, you can negate the attack. The second effect is essentially outclassed by every battle trap in the game, which again are not worth running. But the attack position effect is basically a staple of OTK Morphtronics, because not only is he a 4000 direct attacker when Radion is involved, but if you also add limiter removal to the mix, you can basically insta kill instantly. Like on your very first turn, if you bring this thing out along with Radion and limiter removal, which is not even that hard to do. So yeah, Boomboxen is a definite 3-off staple in basically any Morphtronic build that you can think of. So yeah, and not to mention combined with Boarden, that this is also at 4,000 direct damage if also Radion is involved, and 8,000 to 16,000 burn damage if limiter removal is also involved. Now we move on to Morphtronic STAPLENE. While in attack position, your opponent cannot select another monster as an attack target, and if this card is destroyed by battle, the monster that destroyed it loses 300 attack, and while in defense position, this card cannot be destroyed by battle, and this card is attacked after damage calculation. Select one face-up attack position monster your opponent controls and change it to defense position, and change this card to attack position. This is basically one of the more tolerable first plays Morphtronics used to have back in the day, as you can basically set this thing on your first turn and take 2 hits with nothing harmful coming your way. Not to mention, if you control 2 of them, then that provides a much better log than Morphtronic MAGNEN, but Boarden is still a much more applicable strategy. So yeah, STAPLENE is also a pretty good card. Run 2 or 3 copies in my opinion. Next up we have Morphtronic SLINGEN. While in attack position, once per turn you can tribute a Morphtronic monster except Morphtronic SLINGEN to destroy a card on the field, and while in defense position, if this card would be destroyed, you can destroy any other Morphtronic monster you control instead. The first effect is actually a very neat spot removal and combos very well with one of their spell cards, which we'll mention soon. And the second effect is, it's there. It's not going to go off too often, but again, the options here if you want to take it. But I am confused why they limited you from not tributing SLINGEN himself, because I would have called it a better card if it didn't have that little piece of text on it. So yeah. And their last level 4 is Morphtronic VIDEON, a light level 4 machine, which has the effect that while in attack position, this card can gains 800 attack for each equipped card equipped to it, and while in defense position, this card gains 800 defense for each card equipped to it. It's an arguably better archetypal Mahavilo and often sees play in ORTK Morphtronics. But Radion is most often a better option due to the fact that it requires a bit less setup for it to actually provide some consistent results. But the VIDEON is not bad by any means, due to the fact that Morphtronic equips actually do have some very decent effects, and combined with some of the non-archetypal equipped spells, he can certainly become a very appreciated beatstick. So yeah, it's a great card. And their final main deck monster is the level 6 Gadget Hauler. When this is a level 6 with 1300 attack and 0 defense. And once per turn, you can send any number of Morphtronic monsters from your hand to the graveyard to have this card gain 800 attack for each. I mean, it's not once per turn, and that's it's not until the end phase, that's what I meant to say, and that's basically the best thing about the card, and it's pretty bad overall. Yeah, just don't run this. However, the true monster of the Morphtronic archetype is this level 7 Synchro, namely Power Tool Dragon, which is completely generic, and once per turn you can reveal 3 equipped spell cards from your deck, and then your opponent randomly adds one of them to your hand, and you shuffle the rest back into the deck, and if this card would be destroyed while equipped with an equipped spell card, you can send one of those cards to the graveyard instead. This is by far one of the better monsters from the 5Ds era, due to the fact that he's easily summonable by SCOPEN. He can search literally any equipped spell card, if you're of course playing a deck focused on equipped spells. And yeah, he's basically a staple synchro monster in all those bamboo swords decks. But he also has very formidable protection, at least for the time when he came out, because yeah, you can basically buff him up with several good equipped spells, and it can provide very powerful results depending on what you equip, of course. So yeah, Power Tool Dragon is a definite 2 or 3 of staple in any Morphtronic build. Next up we have their final level 7, which is the manga version of Power Tool, that being Power Tool Mecha Dragon. It's also completely generic, has the exact same stats as the original Power Tool, although it's a dark monster as opposed to Earth. And during your turn, when an equipped spell card is equipped to this card, you can draw one card, and you can only use this effect of Power Tool Mecha Dragon once per turn, and once per turn during either player's turn, you can target an appropriate face-up equipped card on the field and equip that target to this card. Unlike the original, this is not the hardest possible staple in the deck, because drawing a card upon equipping something to it is always nice, but this one does not have the protection that the original basically lives for, and the quick equip shifting isn't going to help you all that often. In fact, I would call it kind of outdated nowadays. So yeah, if you run this, it's probably not more than one. Now for their final monster, we have the level 8 Live Stream Dragon, also known as the late 5D Zaspool. This one is a Dragon Synchro Tuner monster, and requires a tuner and specifically Power Tool Dragon as material. And when this card is Synchro Summoned, you can make your life points becomes 4000. You take no effect damage. If this face-up card on the field would be destroyed, you can banish one equipped spell card from your graveyard instead. This is one of the most format-dependent cards like I have ever seen. The first effect essentially basically refreshes your life points if you happen to be losing heavily, which again, it can be fine, but 4000 life points are something literally anyone in the modern day can take care of in like 2 or 3 turns averagely. The no effect damage effect basically shuts down Trickstars, which means this thing is surprisingly relevant, and not to mention it's also the biggest monster you can summon with Crystron Hulkwifibrax's second effect, due to it being a tuner monster. However, it's also missing the anime effect to modify the levels of all other synchro monsters on the field, which would make the card leagues better than it is right now. And the protection effect is honestly a better version of Power Tool Dragon's effect, as it's actually an evolution of Power Tool Dragon's effect. So yeah, again, if it had the level manipulation effect it did in the anime, then I would have advised running at least 2 of these, because it actually makes summoning all the Quasar Dragons a lot easier. So yeah, as it is right now, it's probably fine if you decide to run 1 or none. Hey, that rhymes. Next up we have our first equip spell, which is Double Tool CND. Equip only to Power Tool Dragon or a level 4 or higher machine type Morphtronic monster. While equipped, during your turn, it gains 1000 attack, and if it attacks, the effects of the attack target is negated during the battle phase. During your opponent's turn, your opponent cannot select another monster other than the equipped monster as an attack target, and an opponent's monster that battles the equipped monster is destroyed at the end of the damage step. Nowadays, it's not too amazing, but back in the day, this was by far one of the most formidable archetypal equips in the game, because if you equip it with Power Tool Dragon, not only you give it protection with his own effect, but you can also turn him into a very formidable boss monster during both players' turns. And yeah, it's a pretty fantastic card, and you should always consider running at least 2 of these. Next up we have Factory of 100 Machines, which is a quick play spell that says remove from play all Morphtronic monsters from your graveyard to target a face-up machine type monster you control, and it gains 200 attack for each card removed. This is very, very bad for all the wrong reasons. First of all, it drains all your resources from the graveyard, which you can use for valuable synchros or to use as recovery during the duel. All for you to give one machine monster. It can be any machine monster, I'll give it that. 200 boost for each one removed, which is not even until which is also until the end phase and not like permanently. Yeah, it's bad. Just don't run it. It's not even searchable by the archetype, and that's how bad it is. Next up we have Junk Box, which is a normal spell that says select and special summon a level 4 or lower Morphtronic monster from your graveyard and destroy it during the end phase. It's a simple archetypal monster reborn, that's as far as it gets, and you should always consider running 2 or 3 of these. because all the recovery you can get is all the advantage you can generate afterward. So yeah. Next up we have Morphtronics Accelerator. Return one Morphtronic card from your hand to the deck, then destroy one card on the field and draw one card. Not as good as it used to be, but still pretty high up there. Basically, you can replace a Morphtronic which you might not need in your hand at the moment to basically pop a card on the field and to basically go with a nice even 0. So yeah, run one or two of these. Next up we have Morphtronic Repair Unit, which is another equip spell, which allows you to send a Morphtronic monster from your hand to the graveyard and select a Morphtronic monster in your graveyard to special summon the selected monster and equip it with this card. And the equipped monster cannot attack, change its battle position, and when this card is removed from the field, destroy the equipped monster. Potentially better than Junk Box due to the fact that it lets you keep the monster even during the end phase of the turn. But worse in a way that it allows that it requires a discard. But hey, if you have a Morphtronic monster you can bring this thing out with, you can basically dump a monster from the hand and then revive said monster from the hand to basically turn the cost into a free resource. I personally love using this when CELFONE is in my hand and I have something else in the graveyard, so I can use the ladder in the graveyard to basically banish it for SMARTFON. So yeah, due to it being searchable by Power Tool Dragon, it's certainly worth running it to at least 2 or 3 copies. Next up we have Morphtronic Cord, which is an equipped spell which you might not want to run in your deck, and that is because you can only equip it to a Morphtronic monster, and each time the equipped monster's battle position is changed, destroy one spell or trap a card on the field. Much like with Alien Telepath, this is one of the other archetypal back row removal that was basically shoved into the archetype due to the fact that MST was limited, and due to the fact that you won't be changing the battle positions of your Morphtronic monsters all that often, this is not worth considering. It's just pretty bad. Next up we have Morphtronic Engine. Equip only to a level 3 Morphtronic monster. Its attack becomes double its original attack, and during your second standby phase after this card's activation, destroy this card and take damage equal to the original attack of the equipped monster. BOARDEN is the only relevant monster which you'll be running, which is in the level range. And although 1000 attack is not much when it comes to an effect like this, and not to mention the best monster which can employ this thing is DATATRON, which is not worth running. So yeah, having a Radion, BOARDEN, and Boomboxen on the field provides much better results, combined with limiter removal, so this is not worth considering any further. Next up we have their final equip spell, which is Morphtronic Rusty Engine. Equip only to a Morphtronic monster, and if the equipped monster is destroyed, inflict damage to each player equal to its original attack. Like with Morphtronic Cord and all the MST kind of like effects, this is supposed to mimic Ring of Destruction's effect, because Ring of Destruction was banned around the time period this card comes from, and yeah, it's one of those crap cards we had to tolerate during said era. So we don't have to tolerate it now due to Ring of Destruction being at 3, so yeah, don't run this. And their final spell card is their field spell Morphtronic Map. Each time a monster's battle position is changed, place one morph counter on this card. All Morphtronic monsters gain 300 attack for each morph counter on this card, and when this card is destroyed and sent from the field to the graveyard, you can special summon a Morphtronic monster from your graveyard. They really didn't try with this effect because it's pretty underwhelming for all the wrong reasons. The boost is very slow and insignificant, and not to mention the floating effect only brings back a Morphtronic from the graveyard, which most other cards which we've covered by now can do a much better job at without the existence of this. Don't run this. Next up we have Morphtronic MONITRON, a continuous trap which says that when a Morphtronic monster is summoned, you can change it to face-up defense position. A neat idea in an archetype that is focused on changing battle positions, but again, rarely any Morphtronic monsters need to be in face-up defense position in order to for this thing to be of any use, especially BOARDEN, which can be summoned with Machine Dupe instantly in defense position. So yeah, it's not worth considering, and this looks like a monster rather than a continuous trap. So yeah. Next up we have Morphtransition. Activate only when a face-up Morphtronic monster you control is selected as an attack target. Negate the attack and change the battle position of the selected Morphtronic monster. Much like the other outdated battle traps in the game, not worth discussing any further, because, again, it only saves you from one attack and changes the monster's battle position, which isn't going to be relevant unless the monster is a MAGNEN, just like here in the artwork. Next up we have a continuous trap, Morphtronic Bind. When while you control face-up Morphtronic monsters, all level 4 or higher monsters your opponent controls cannot attack or change their battle positions. This is essentially an archetypal gravity bind, which also prevents battle position shifting, which is kind of neat, but that also comes at a cost of controlling a Morphtronic monster, which, if you happen to link them all away or send them to the graveyard for synchro plays, this card becomes borderline useless. So yeah, it's kind of specific, but you can run one if you really feel like it, due to the fact that the lock is actually pretty strong. Next up we have Morphtronic Scramble. Activate only when your opponent declares a direct attack while you control no monsters. What? How? Wait, huh? Well, negate the attack and special summon one Morphtronic monster from your hand. Yeah, the effect is kind of underwhelming, but the wording is kind of weird. Activate only when your opponent controls a direct attack while you control no monsters. Oh wait, it can... I thought that there are monsters which can attack over your other monsters, and yeah, I get where this card is coming from now, and the wording just kind of baffled me at first, but yeah. The effect is very underwhelming, and you shouldn't basically consider running it because it's not worth the effort. Next up we have Morphtronics Mix-Up. If you control 2 or more face-up Morphtronic monsters, select 2 cards your opponent controls, destroy 1 card of your opponent's choice from it. A reverse Icarus attack, and not a very good one at that, as your opponent is not even kind enough to let you choose. This is not a mix-up, this is something I can't quite put my words on it. Well, it's a mix-up of very bad effects. It's a mix-up of what the ratios of Icarus attacks are actually like. So yeah. Next up we have Morphtronics Force Field, which is a counter trap, honestly enough. And negate the activation of a spell or trap in a card that would destroy a face-up Morphtronic monster you control and destroy it. Then you can add a Morphtronic card from your deck to your hand. This is kind of baffling. First of all, Morphtronic monsters, unless they are OTK Morphtronics, don't tend to be remaining on the field, and they will rarely ever be targeted by spell or trap effects. And yeah, this is one of the only cards in the archetype, if not the only card in the archetype, that can offer unrestricted searching in the archetype. So yeah, it's kind of sad, honestly. So yeah. Next up we have Power Up Adapter. After activation, treat this card as an equipped card and equip it to a face-up Morphtronic monster you control. The equipped monster cannot attack, then select 1 face-up monster in the field, except the equipped monster. Its attack it gains attack equal to the attack of the equipped monster. In OTK Morphtronic, this is usually used to give them that final edge they might not achieve with just limiter removal and Boomboxen and Radion and BOARDEN on the field, if the opponent happens to have higher than normal life points, or if simply don't have access to limiter removal. So yeah, this is a good card, although it pains me about the name because it isn't searchable, and not even by FORCEFIELD for that matter. And their final card is the normal trap Power Break. Activate only while you control a face-up Power Tool Dragon. Select up to 3 equipped cards on your side of the field and or in your graveyard, and return them to the deck, then inflict 500 damage to your opponent for each card returned. Essentially, this is an archetypal way to recycle some from some equipped spells, and this also provides some neat burn damage along the side. So yeah, it's a decent card to consider, and yeah, it's a bit slower because it's a trap card and requires a specific synchro monster to be on the field. So yeah, running more than one is usually not necessary. Now, time for the grades. Tongue wrap. Anyway, in terms of consistency, the fact that they are machines, most of them being summonable by machine dupe, is also good enough for me to give them a 2 out of 3, even though their internal archetype consistency is not worth discussing much. Power gets a very respectable 2 out of 3 due to the fact that OTK Morphtronics, while they are specific, they have very legit power outputs available, so yeah, I will give them that at least. In terms of comeback ability, the sheer amount of things they can employ in order to come back from a beatdown is simply amazing. Again, machine dupe is also a thing, and with the correct targets they can make a very quick and easy synchro, which can clear out most of the problem stuff they have dealing with. So yeah, I'll give them a very generous 2 out of 3. Protection is barely there, only Power Tools Dragon's protection effect is the most relevant one. Force Field is very outdated nowadays. And yeah, it's a 1 out of 3 when it comes to deck. But as for the versatility, the deck truly shines here. So I will give them a 3 out of 3 due to the fact that they have access to some synchro spam builds due to running a lot of tuners. OTK Morphtronics speaks for themselves. Equip-based decks focused all around Power Tool Dragon and basically all kinds of buffs and debuffs. Using said Power Tool Dragon, they can go for some very niche extra link variants. So yeah, they definitely really stand out in this regard, and they are certainly one of the 5Ds era archetypes done right. So yeah, this is a really neat little archetype that was basically a successor to Roids in a way, since they have kind of similar themings going around. While Roids don't have any focus at all, this one actually does have a clear focus in his playstyle. So yeah, I guess 5D's era tends to fix everything which was wrong with the first and the first Yu-Gi-Oh show and the GX show. So yeah, I guess it truly lives up to the name of one of the greatest Yu-Gi-Oh shows ever made. But speaking of GX, we are returning to the GX era with the semi-final GX era archetype we will be looking at in this RADA marathon. And after that archetype, I have a small sidetrack, not that small, but anyway, a sidetrack from the marathon, and after that I'll be closing it off with the final archetype analysis that will appear in a very good while, because now with that archetype out of the way, I really won't have any other archetypes to review. And from what I'm hearing about how Yu-Gi-Oh! 7's is structured, that it's a completely different beast of its own, it's certain that we won't be seeing this series for a very long time. And my last video of this year should be uploaded I think on the 28th of December. So yeah, after that, well, I'll just let you all know after in my thank you video for 2020. So yeah, I'll see you guys in the next video. Thank you all so much for watching. Stay tuned for more videos and updates. Comment, like, and subscribe. Be sure to check out my Patreon when you got the time. Maybe drop a few donations if you feel like it. And I'll see you all and have a good day. Peace.